Welcome to another edition of the Parliamentary Agenda. I'm your host, Shaquan Gill, and for this particular episode, the episode just before Budget Day 2023, we have with us none other than the Senior Minister within the Office of the President with responsibility for finance, Dr. Ashni Singh. Dr. Singh, thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you very much, Shaquan. As always, it's a great pleasure to be here on the program.
Definitely. Now, Minister, we're officially in budget season again, with the most recent announcement of Monday being Budget Day 2023. Just before we go into anything intensive, just walk us through this year's planning for Budget 2023, the budget process, putting together the fiscal outline.
Sure. So, I'm glad that you asked that question because it is an important question, the answer to which is not, I rather suspect, is not fully and completely and widely understood. The public witnesses the theater that surrounds the presentation of the budget in the Parliament and the debate of the budget in the Parliament. So what is really visible is to the world at large is going to be Monday's presentation and the 2 or 3 weeks debate that will ensue shortly thereafter. But in fact, the budget process is a much longer process, and it's in many regards almost a continuous process. And I say this because, of course, the budget is merely the annual expression of government's economic projections and plans, and the process by which those projections are arrived at, and the process by which those plans are developed and refined and then subsequently implemented is in fact, logically, if you think about it, a continuous one. And particularly for a government whose hallmark has been policy continuity and consistency, which indeed is the hallmark of successive People's Progressive Party civic governments, and certainly this one, whereby the policy positions that we've adopted have not hopped and skipped around the landscape from year to year, but instead have comprised a very consistent set of core principles to which we are committed and a very consistent set of policies by which we will operationalize those core principles, and indeed objectives that are very widely known and that have been frequently articulated. So to give you to put things in context, as you know, we were elected to government on the basis of a manifesto. And that manifesto was itself the subject of extensive consultation with stakeholders and with the people of Guyana.
Of course.
And it formed the basis on which we were elected to government. And the manifesto continues to constitute our contract with the people of Guyana who elected us. It comprises the things that we committed to the people of Guyana that we will deliver. And it therefore guides all that we do as a government. The manifesto has therefore been translated into successive annual budgets aimed at delivering these manifesto commitments. And so from the time we got into office, the 2020 emergency budget, the 2021 and 2022 annual budgets, full year budgets, and now the imminent 2023 full year budget. All of these budgets are built upon the manifesto and are designed to deliver on the commitments that we articulated in our manifesto. Now, obviously, the budget is framed within a macroeconomic and a fiscal context, what we would call the macroeconomic framework. That is to say, the projected outcomes in the economy, macroeconomic outcomes, growth in the economy, etc., growth in the respective sectors, and the updated fiscal framework, that is to say, the revenues, expenditure, etc., that we anticipate getting. We are constantly monitoring, so we have a medium-term fiscal framework that anticipates a medium-term macroeconomic framework that anticipates not only annual growth, but medium-term growth.
Yeah.
And all of the main macroeconomic aggregates and indicators are projected for the medium term. We're constantly updating this. And so the budget process is also situated within a certain macroeconomic context. What is happening in the global economy? We have to constantly update ourselves on what's happening in the global economy because, of course, Guyana is a part of the global economic system. And so monitoring what's happening on the global economic front is an important part of the budget process, and indeed is an ongoing part of the budget process. And as you know, the global economy has been going through some extremely tumultuous times, not only as a result of COVID-19, which of course has presented a tremendous challenge to policymakers around the world, but also the fallout of COVID-19 and the lockdown associated with COVID-19, things like the spike in freight charges, which issues in relation to supply chain, the global supply chain, and what that has meant for global trade, issues in connection with the Russia invasion of Ukraine, and what that has meant for not only trade in certain commodities, but commodity prices as well. As you know, certain commodities suffered an immediate spike when those developments in Ukraine emerged. Global inflationary pressures. We've seen around the world economies responding to emergent global inflationary pressures and trying to rein in inflation as a result of escalating fuel and food prices and so on. And that has now brought with it, of course, some element of recessionary risk. And so we have to constantly, as economic policymakers and as a responsible government, we have to constantly keep an eye on what is happening in the global economy and how that will feed through multiple channels into the domestic economy. And we have to, of course, update our own domestic economic projections, developments in the oil and gas sector, developments in the other extractive sector, gold, bauxite, quarry materials, etc. Developments in the agricultural sector and how we see those evolving, and how those will feed into what we call the real economy or the productive economy, real GDP.
Right.
And that, of course, in turn translates into things like job creation, etc., income generation, and ultimately government revenues. And then, of course, we forecast, we update our fiscal forecasts, what we anticipate the fiscal outcomes will be, government revenue, government expenditure, what the expenditure requirements are to roll out and advance the various government programs and projects. That itself is an ongoing process. And as a government, we also remain constantly engaged with multiple stakeholders, all of the stakeholders in our society, because we want also not only to form our own, not only to form and to be guided by our own perspectives on developments in the global economy and developments in the domestic economy, but importantly, we want to hear from other stakeholders in society what their perspectives are, how they see things evolving, what are their main concerns, their main issues, what their perspectives are on key issues that are confronting us, etc. And we do that on an ongoing basis too. You know, as a government, we pride ourselves on the closeness of our engagement with stakeholders in society, and so we have an ongoing engagement with private sector, with the religious community, with you know, even industry and sectoral and special interest groups. You know, we have an ongoing engagement with stakeholders. You would have seen, for example, that only a few days ago, I think just about last week, His Excellency convened an engagement at State House where he spoke about the future of the country.
Yes.
That was a broad-based group that was there, and we had an opportunity to engage with that group. But that, and it was an excellent engagement, but it represented, of course, only one installment of an ongoing engagement with stakeholders in society. That also is an important part of the budget process, because it allows you an opportunity to hear from stakeholders what they consider to be the most important issues and what they consider to be the issues that they want to see addressed. And then finally, if I may, we maintain an ongoing engagement with the people of Guyana. This is not a government that formulates policies in our offices in isolation from what the people of Guyana are saying. And so one of the really distinguishing characteristics of People's Progressive Party governments has been its constant and ongoing close engagement at the grassroots level. Every day and every week, our president is in one community or another, whether in Region 9, Region 1, Region 6, Region 10, and the list goes on. And where the president is unable to be today, one of his ministers will be there today or tomorrow. Every weekend, you see ministers fanning out to different regions, having constituency meetings, having community meetings, listening and hearing what the concerns are of these communities and feeding back that information into the policy-making process as well, and into the decision-making process. And that is also an ongoing activity. And that is also an activity that informs what we do through the instrument of our annual budgets. Mm-hmm. So the process is really an ongoing one, and has been going on for a long time. But the process in the public eye, the more visible part of the budget process, is what I would call it's perhaps a little bit unfair to call it the theater, but I will for the time being call it the theater, the very public expression of the budget process through the delivery of the budget speech and the budget debate. That is an extremely important part of the budget process, but that's the public part. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And it's an important part, and I'm happy to come back if you give me the opportunity and if time permits to speak about why that is important. Mm-hmm. But that's the part that happens in the public eye, if you like. Mm-hmm. The part that happens, there's a lot of hard work to which many, many people have been contributing for many, many weeks and months.
Mm-hmm. Minister, you mentioned specifically the engagements with people, particularly with the private sectors we've seen. What was the response like from the private sector in relation to Budget 2023? Mm-hmm.
I'm glad you asked that question. The private sector of Guyana had been reeling from 5 years of bad policy from 2015 to 2020. At a time when our economy should have been growing rapidly because we were gearing up for first oil, we were growing at an extremely anemic level. And the non-oil economy had almost disappeared. Agriculture had been deliberately neglected and was suffering the consequences of political vindictiveness by the APNU AFC. We all know what had transpired with the sugar industry, for example, but the same had applied in rice-producing communities and other crops. The agriculture was basically in the doldrums. And the same could be said across almost every other non-oil sector and non-oil sector and subsector. And so one of the first tasks that faced us as a government when we came into office, when President Ali assumed office on the 2nd of August, was to restore Guyana's attractiveness as a destination for private investment and for private business, and restore Guyana's Guyana's status as a hospitable place in which to do business. And we did set about doing that diligently, with the result that very quickly projects that had been put on hold were once again restarted. Mm-hmm. Projects that were shelved were brought back on board, on stream. And private investment resumed, and private sector-led growth resumed, and the non-oil economy breathed some oxygen in for the first time after 5 years of being starved of oxygen. And that mood and perspective by the private sector has continued ever since. A recognition that the People's Progressive Party values the role of the private sector in creating jobs and in generating income. And I will always say that very publicly. We value the role of the private sector in creating jobs and in generating incomes, and we will work with the private sector to ensure that they continue to create more jobs for Guyanese people and that they generate, therefore, more incomes for Guyanese households. And that is what managing a private sector-led economy involves. And so what you're seeing, the strong growth that you've been seeing since we've returned to office, is a reflection of that. It's a reflection of a private sector that recognizes that once again Guyana is a good place to do business. They're investing, they're growing, they're creating jobs, and the economy is doing well. And Budget 2023 will constitute an advancement of this agenda. It will constitute us taking this agenda forward, making sure that non-oil growth remains strong. Of course, we want the oil sector to continue to do well too, and it is anticipated to continue to do just that, to do well. But we want to make sure that we lay the basis for very strong non-oil growth as well.
Minister, finally, looking ahead to Budget 2023, I want to ask you very simply too, what can Guyanese expect from Budget 2023 that will significantly impact their lives and standard of living?
Well, I know that notwithstanding that you are relatively young, I consider you to be a veteran of the media corps, so I know that you know that I will answer that question in a somewhat general way. As has always been the case with People's Progressive Party civic government budgets presented by PPPC governments, Budget 2023 will continue to do the things and to deliver the things that are necessary to improve the lives of all Guyanese people and to create opportunities for all Guyanese people. And it will do so through a number of instruments and through a number of initiatives. Some will be direct and some will be indirect, such as those initiatives designed at, like I said, preserving the private investment environment, creating jobs, training people to fill those jobs, etc. But what the overarching and core message that I can deliver is that Budget 2023 will constitute yet another installment through which this PPPC government led by President Ali will continue to improve the lives of all Guyanese people within the context of President Ali's deeply and strongly held philosophy of one Guyana, the oneness of our country, the fact that we're all united around the common cause of advancing and developing our country, and the fact that we must all participate in and benefit from the exciting and the incredibly exciting transformation that is taking place, and that even more so will continue to take place in the future in this beautiful country of ours.
Dr. Singh, I want to thank you so much for taking the opportunity to have this discussion, and we look forward to Budget 2023.
Thank you very much, Shakwan. As always, it's a great pleasure to be with you in this program and, of course, with your viewers through their television sets.
Definitely. This has been another episode of the Parliamentary Agenda. You've heard from the Senior Minister in the Office of the President with responsibility for finance, Dr. Ashni Singh. Be sure to log in and tune in to NCN's full coverage of Budget Day 2023 on Monday. I am Shakwan Gill saying goodbye for now.